Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the January 18th Oldham County Board of Adjustments. My name is Larry Otterback. It is 9 o'clock, and we are now in session. We have 4 cases before us today. The procedures for all 4 cases are going to be the same. Here in a minute, I'm going to swear staff in. Gretchen is going to read the staff report. I'm going to call staff forward to the podium. They're going to give us the staff report. And there will be a round of questioning by board members to staff, and when we're done with that, staff's going to take a seat. I'm going to call you, the applicant, forward. Please come forward to the podium, speak directly into the mic. Things are being recorded, so we're not able to speak out in the audience. If you have something to say, you need to come forward and speak into the mic. When you come forward, you're going to raise your right hand. You're going to get sworn in, state your name and address, and justify the case. There'll be a round of questioning by board members to you, the applicant. And when we're done with that, you may take a seat, and you have 20 minutes to justify your case. Clock is on the wall, and Christy is in charge of the clock. When you're done, you may take a seat. I'm going to call forward anybody that wishes to speak in favor of the application and then opposed to the application, and it's the same procedures for both. Come forward. You're going to raise your right hand, get sworn in, state your name and address, tell us why you're in favor, tell us why you're opposed. You have 10 minutes collectively. Again, clock's on the wall. Christy's in charge of the clock. But you have 10 minutes to tell us why you're in favor of the application. You have 10 minutes to tell us why you're opposed to the application. There might be a round of questioning by board members to you. When we're done with that, you may take a seat. If there's any opposition to the application, I'm going to call the applicant forward for any rebuttals. You'll have 5 minutes for rebuttals, and then I'll have time for the opposition. And then we'll do final statements. At the end of all that, I'm going to open it up to the board members for any questions for anybody. I'm going to close the floor for public hearing, open it up for general discussion, and call for an up and down vote. Please make sure your phones are off or on silent. If you need to take a call, just please excuse yourself from the courtroom. Do whatever you need to. Just make sure it's off when you come back in. And board members, please make sure your mics are on. And with that, let's swear staff in.
Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you.
Thank you. And Gretchen, if you want to read the first one, please.
OC 24-001, an application has been filed requesting a conditional use permit for a kennel, including pet daycare and grooming services on property located at 5998 Pleasant Colony Court, Suite 17 in Crestwood. The property is zoned 3C, General Business District.
Okay, good morning.
Good morning, Brian Fogel, Assistant Director, Oldham County Planning Development Services. The request that you all are hearing right now is a conditional use for a kennel operation. Something that is unique with this particular request is that it's completely comprised indoors, so there's no outdoor activity or outdoor runs, and that gets significant as we get further in and you start looking at how the zoning ordinance regulates kennels. Notifications for today's hearing were provided on the county's website. Adjoining property owner notices were mailed, and then also legal advertisement in the Oldham Era newspaper. The request is the conditional use in a currently vacant indoor space in the Pleasant Colony Shopping Center in Crestwood near the intersection of Highway 329 bypass and 146. This is the intersection right here of Veterans Memorial Parkway or the bypass and 146. So the McDonald's is here. Jim Waits Chrysler is here. The CVS is here. The South Oldham campus is here. Little Caesars, Verizon, and then the building that the request that you're all considering is right here. It's the most recent building that's been built as part of the Pleasant Colony commercial area, which is basically all this right here. The parcel is highlighted in blue. Again, the request is for a vacant space in the building that's right here. Just a few pictures. This is the entrance into the Pleasant Colony commercial area off of the Highway 329 bypass. This is the secondary entrance off of 146. Just looking back at that. This is the actual building that the request is being made in, and the space that the request is being made for is located right here. The zoning in the area is commercial, where you have commercial development in the area, and then the school campus and the surrounding residential areas are zoned residential. There's a lot of site history with the Pleasant Colony Shopping Center that goes back to 2006. So it's being developed in phases. I'm not going to delve into a lot of that except for the three things that are significant to this particular building. So the overall commercial development was approved in 2006 with the rezoning and a development plan approved. In July of 2007, there was a revised development plan. And then the building permit for this particular building that's before you guys today was issued in July of 2016. So the request is for a kennel operation completely contained in an indoor space in a 4,000 square foot vacant space. As part of their application, the applicants have indicated that it'll occupy 4,000 square feet of indoor space, that it will consist of 5 large indoor play areas for dogs with accommodations for 37 dogs, a spa room, a prep room, and then the lobby. That the kennel business will consult with a professional soundproofing engineer to address concerns about sounds for adjoining properties, that it will be equipped with drainage for cleaning, and that there will be an air purification system to address potential odors, and that the business will be completely contained within the building, that there won't be any outdoor runs or play areas. The applicant has provided a picture here of what the outside of the building would look like in terms of their signage. So a wall sign right here, and then where there's a multi-tenant sign at the entrance to the shopping center. This is a floor plan for what they're proposing to do in the indoor space. On the perimeter, you've got the 37 places or suites for the dogs to stay, and then there's 5 play areas around the middle, and then prep rooms and stuff like that also on the perimeter. So we're going to look at this, what's highlighted in yellow, very specifically, but this is an image of the zoning ordinance that addresses veterinarian operations and kennels. Okay, so the zoning ordinance establishes standards for those, and the first standard it has is the number of animals that would be allowed in a kennel when you guys are considering a conditional use. And basically, the zoning ordinance says that it's your all's determination on whether or not the number of animals that are being proposed for the kennel operation is appropriate. But then it also puts the burden on the applicant to present evidence to you all that the number that they're proposing is appropriate for the facility that they have before your all's consideration. It also says that all kennels and basically the runs must be located within soundproof buildings to prevent noise from reaching neighboring properties, which is applicable to this application. Then there's also a standard that really just applies to outdoor operations, which would not apply to this particular request because everything that they're proposing will be on the indoors. That this particular standard here would be if they would have exercise runs that would be located outside. So this particular requirement of the zoning ordinance is not applicable to this application. That all kennel pens are located in enclosed area, which is applicable to this because it's an indoor space, and that any exercise areas be site obscuring, which again, this will be because it's an indoor space. And then just a general standard in the zoning ordinance, it says the operation would not create any objectionable odors that would be affecting the neighboring property owners. So in their justification statement, the applicant provided a fairly lengthy description of why they're requesting this for this particular location. And a full copy of that was included in your staff report. But basically, to sum it up, They're saying that there's the opportunity for a kennel here because the Crestwood area is a family-oriented area with a high rate of pet ownership. So the request is for a kennel operation in a 4,000 square foot vacant commercial area in the Pleasant Colony Shopping Center. And that concludes the presentation of the staff report. In terms of any phone calls or correspondence that we've gotten for this application, we have not received anything. No phone calls, no emails, or people visiting the office with any questions about this particular application.
Okay, thanks, Brian. Questions for Brian?
I have a question. The ordinance says a soundproof building. What is a soundproof building, and what constitutes a soundproof building? Because in this area, there are other businesses in there.
Yeah.
So what constitutes a soundproof building?
The ordinance makes the general statement that it has to be a soundproof building. But it doesn't give a specific standard. So that's something that's probably more appropriate for the applicant to answer. The applicant did indicate in their application that they are going to consult with the sound engineer, and then they should be able to explain to you what measures they're taking for soundproofing. So it's basically a question that you're asking that's more appropriately answered by the applicant.
So I have several more, so I'll wait for the applicant.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for Brian?
Yes, so it is up to the board to decide on the, oh, I'm so sorry. It's up to the board to decide on the appropriateness of the number of animals. There's no set maximum. This is
That
a
is
judgment
correct.
call?
There's no standard that's based upon the square footage or staffing or anything like that. It basically says it's your all's decision based upon the evidence that the applicant presents to you all to justify the number that they're requesting.
All right, thank you.
Who takes care of the raw sewage? What is that? A health department? There's going to be a lot of waste. Who constitutes the work with that?
Mr. Allen, I only caught part of the question. If you can.
There's going to be a lot of waste.
Right.
Who controls that? Is that the MSMD or what?
Well, the property is located on sewers, so they will need to get their approvals to connect from MSD to connect into the sewer system. In terms of any health department regulations, I'm not aware of any, but the applicant may be aware of some of those regulations.
Yeah.
Okay, further questions for Brian? We can call him back forward if we need to at a later time. Thank you, Brian. And if we could have the applicant come forward, please. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. My name is Cliff Ashburner. I'm with Dinsmore and Scholl. My address is 101 South 5th Street, Louisville 40202. I'm here today on behalf of the applicant. So as a preliminary matter, what I will go through a few land use items, and then Shelley Beggs, who is here with Houndstown, is going to talk to you a little bit about the operation of the business. I think she may be able to answer some of the questions that you all brought up and that we anticipated that you would bring up in today's conversation. One other thing I want to mention, as Brian noted, there has been no conversation with anybody really other than the landlord. The landlord, of course, has an obligation to all the tenants in the building to make sure that they're all taken care of and that they have quiet enjoyment of their space. And the landlord is committed to doing that, and so that's going to be part of the build out of the suite. So, as Brian went through, obviously this is in Crestwood. It's a rapidly growing area of the county. A significant amount of residential is already there, and as you all know, a much more significant amount of residential is coming to the area. Shelley, in her evaluation of this, is a good location for a doggy daycare and kennel. Did the research and determined that there is a higher than normal level of pet ownership here. In addition, the people who typically live in this area really, really take care of their pets. So these are not just folks who, have dogs, but these are people who have and love their dogs and treat them well. So this is a good location for the proposal. Pleasant Colony, as was mentioned, is Zone C3, which of course is your general commercial zoning district. The general commercial zoning district includes lots of uses, many of which are already in Pleasant Colony, things like restaurants, delis, there's daycare, there's fitness center, medical offices, the Verizon store that you saw, and some of which, could be uses that would generate impacts, like a larger restaurant, bar, something like that. This space has been empty since it was built. So the building has been filling in, but this particular suite, which was built in 2016, hasn't had a previous tenant in it. We think that the site, the location, is good, and the fact that this is sort of a blank slate will allow Houndstown to build it out and build it out appropriately for the use. So this was some of the evaluation that was done, the amount of vehicles per day that come by the property. Obviously, Veterans Parkway is pretty heavily traveled. 146, of course, is heavily traveled. And those numbers I would expect just to go up. This is the location of the suite, so it's back in the commercial area. We're really not too close to residential, and as Brian mentioned, the entirety of this operation is going to be indoors. And then here's another shot of the premises, and you can see essentially the premises is, it's not the middle of the building, but it's close to the middle of the building. Here's a shot with some proposed signage that is not exactly to scale. As you can see, that's kind of a Photoshop opportunity to show what this outdoor signage would look like. But it will be tasteful and certainly something that that Ms. Beggs wants to be attractive to potential customers. With that, I would like her to come up and talk to you a little bit about the business, how she decided to get into it, a little bit about the founder of Houndstown as well, and then I'll come back up to finish up.
Morning. I need you to get sworn in.
Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Name and address, please.
Shelley Beggs, Beggs, 7411 Grand Oaks Drive, Crestwood, Kentucky, 40014. All right. Okay, so I kind of wanted to go through the history of this organization and why I selected this franchise. Can you hear me? Okay, yeah, they're kind of low. Can you hear me now? Okay. This franchise actually was founded in 1982. The owner of this franchise was he was the NYPD, one of the initial K-9 unit officers that was part of that area, and from that, he decided to look more into dogs based on his passion and love for animals. And dogs in particular, he wanted to study their behaviors more. And so fast forward a little bit to approximately 2000, he opened up his first doggy daycare with what he believed was the way that dogs naturally interact with other dogs. With an interactive doggy daycare, they like to be pack animals, so they want to all roam around in packs all day long. So that's what he wanted to test out in 2000 when he started his first business, his own daycare business. And then from there he grew, added 2 more businesses. And then as he learned and tested each one of these different things as he came across them, it became such a great model that he ended up franchising in approximately 2012 is when he sold his first franchise. And from there it's grown into approximately 50 franchises nationwide, with approximately 55 more in the works. That that is done slowly and methodically, the way that one should do. And so they're trying to continuously grow this without making sure that each one of the franchises has the support they need as they go along and open up. But I also wanted to add that we do doggy daycare as well as dog boarding, pet spa, and potentially cat boarding. We'll see what the need is, but the doggy daycare is a fully interactive all-day doggy daycare. This is typically what our actual boarding facility looks like. This is along the outside edges of the walls. If you go back to the layout, the conceptual drawing, these are each little rooms considered kennels, but we call them suites. Different sizes, approximately 37 of those. And for the animal control ordinances, we have no outdoor runs, so any issues with that is null.
I'm sorry, what, I didn't catch that?
We don't have any outdoor runs at all, so that part of it is not necessary. And then we have no outdoor play areas, so the outdoor sound nuisance shouldn't be an issue. And then professional soundproofing engineer will be part of the process, and we also are going to work closely with our tenants, our neighboring tenants, and the landlord. We've already had this discussion with the landlord, and so hopefully we'll be able to come to some, we do approximately 52 STC rating as a standard, and we can improve that based on the need. But as the facility is laid out, this is the current condition of it. The half of the floor is not finished, so we can put in the piping and all the different things that are necessary. There's no electricity or anything in this building currently. And this is the way the facility is laid out. So all around the edges is the kennels, which will be butted up against each side of the tenants. And when the dogs are actually kenneled at night, the other tenants will no longer be there, so it won't be during any other business hours. So if any dogs are barking that are close to the walls, the tenants will not be there. So hopefully that won't be an issue. All of the play areas are on the inside of the facility, away from the exterior walls. And that's where most of the communicating with the dogs happens. And so we try to keep it as quiet as possible. Is that the last slide? Is there? Okay, I can. Oh, that's our slogan. We do it for the dogs. The whole model was built around the dog, so we consider the dog our customer. So I know the parent is the paying customer, but the dog is who we try to make happy. So kind of what we try to do is, since dogs are pack animals and humans don't tend to understand that, we try to educate the parents why we do things the way we do, because we do it a little bit differently, but we have everything designed all around the dog and the fact that they're pack animals and they just want to hang out with their buddies. So
a couple of things. To address your question, Member Turner, as far as soundproofing or sound mitigation goes, as you saw in the explanation, so there is the design itself, so where you're not really using special materials, you're just locating walls in a different way, where you have, if you want to consider it the louder area or the area that is likely to generate the most noise in the center of the space, then you have a wall around, there are barriers around those play areas. Then you have the hallway in front of the suites. Then you have the doors to the suites and the wall there. Then there's space. Then you get to a demising wall. So there are multiple layers of material in the way. In addition, as I mentioned before, the landlord is well aware of this use and the surrounding uses. If additional materials need to be placed maybe behind or on the demising wall, those will be used at when that construction is completed. So we're well aware, Ms. Beggs is well aware of the need to be a good tenant, and the landlord is well aware of its obligation to its other tenants in order to have them have a quiet place to work or operate their store. And so the design that you saw, in addition to any additional materials that are needed on that back wall, we think will be adequate sound mitigation.
Okay, you used the term adequate,
Yes.
and that's fine. My question was with response to what the zoning law says. Okay, and so that can go either way. I've spent several years working in a dog kennel, so I'm speaking from what I know, not what I think, okay?
Yeah.
You get a dog that comes in there and they
Careful with any personal
Okay.
testimony.
With regards to noise, a dog can come in there and they start barking and don't stop for 20 or 30 minutes. I've yet to see a building that maintains that. And we have, and that's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
When we're talking about soundproofing. The other thing is, that's just one of them. My other concern basically was, you don't have an outside run, so you're gonna all be on the inside. But my other concern was, we've got all these other businesses there. Some of them are eating places, the storage and the cleanup and storage of feces.
Mm-hmm.
Will it be, in a place where it won't be, in the summertime when it gets 99 degrees, would it be smelling up the area? So those were my two basic concerns.
Mm-hmm. So, and I think this touched on a question over here with Mr. Allen. Yeah, so there would be continuous cleaning by the staff as the dogs are in the run area where they might use the bathroom. That cleaning includes using enzymatic cleaners that are designed to break down the waste and keep breaking it down even after it's seemingly dry. And any solid waste would probably be stored indoors until it's time to be disposed of. So we don't think that odors are going to be an issue out of the property. And as Ms. Beggs mentioned, with regard to drains and things like that that can get into the sewer, this property, as I mentioned before, is kind of a blank slate. And so we're able to put in that infrastructure now. So if there is an area that needs to be hosed or something like that, this space is going to be made ready for that.
Hey, Charles, let's remember, this might go back and forth between staff and calling the applicant back up, but let's bring staff back up when appropriate and ask about the health issues, the health department, and how they address, are there any departments that manage this and monitor this? I mean, there's got to be something within the county. So let's ask staff that, then we might have to bring these guys back up and talk a little bit further, but.
Okay.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, we're not aware of any health department regulation that is specific to an indoor kennel. We think we're going to be, Ms. Beggs knows what she's doing in terms of operating the property. And obviously, a dirty place is not a place you're going to leave your dog. So it is very much in her interest in order to keep the property clean and keep anything, off the floor.
So there is no governmental regulating body that regulates whether, the disposal of solid waste for dog kennels?
I'm not aware of a regulation that covers that specific thing. It may be just based on how dog kennels have historically operated, where.
So nothing says per run, like in a residence, per bedroom, the size has, the septics have to be this and the laterals have to be, there's nothing that you're aware of that regulates that for dog facilities?
Not that we're aware of, but.
Let me call Charlie Ward at the health department and see if he can come over here if he's available.
Yeah, I appreciate that, thank you.
Yeah.
Seems like there would be.
There seems to be a regulation for almost everything. So,
Exactly.
and Mr. Turner, your question to Brian about what constitutes a soundproof building is a very good one, and I don't know that there is a definition. There are many uses that have noise impacts. So directly adjacent to this property is an F45 fitness clinic. In another building in the property, there's a jazzercise studio. When they're having a class, there's noise. and there's no way to avoid that. They play loud music. It's part of the fitness experience there. It's handled in such a way that it does not become a bother to other tenants. And so I think this would be handled in the same way. As I mentioned, and as Ms. Beggs mentioned, this design is intentional. It is designed to minimize those impacts. So keeping the boarding areas on the perimeter where, and I don't know if you noticed, these are all, large size doors. There are windows in there, but there are shades as well to isolate the animals so that they're not, kind of agitated by what might be happening on the other side of the door.
And what we're seeing here, is it your testimony that what we're seeing here is what, in fact, is going to be in the proposal? Each kennel is going to be shut off in individual rooms, they will have doors. What we're seeing is, in fact, what you're proposing.
Yes, I want to be clear. The colors on the walls may be different, but
The doors,
the doors, yes.
the individual kennels,
Yeah.
the walkway, the play area.
Yes.
Looks like it's got a fenced-off area there.
Yes. And that is part of the Houndstown kind of franchise model is this design.
So,
Ms. Beggs, you actually answered most of the questions that I had written down as to whether this was a franchise operation or not, and how many locations there were. And that's significant because of the fact that sound mitigation and waste removal and all of these things would have to be addressed in a standard way. If it's a franchise operation, I'd be more concerned if it was a one-off type of thing that was being experimental in an indoor enclosure. So I think it's significant that they are franchises, but I do have a couple questions about that. There are 37 individual rooms for each of the dogs. Does that mean 37 dogs, or do you double board with a family that has more than one dog?
So I don't know if it's clear on there. There's a couple double facilities, a couple double spaces, and I think there's 2 doubles. That
I see one on the corner.
Yeah, on
Oh,
each
on
of the
each corner,
corners.
yes, okay.
And then also there's some luxury ones. So it's a very simple business model. So that's really our only choices is the.
But just because we have to look at the maximum number of animals to deem whether that is appropriate or not, it is possible that there will be more dogs than there are individual kennels on occasion.
Yes.
There could be, possibly.
Yes. And then
Okay.
also I might mention that Houndstown has a standard for estimating how many dogs go in because they don't want overpopulation either.
Right.
So they do 45 per usable square foot.
I see.
So you could eliminate the office and the prep room and the lobby, that kind of thing, and the spa where we actually aren't housing dogs, and then take that square footage and divide it by 45. And I think that's a pretty conservative estimate. It comes up to approximately 68. So in that size of facility, that's pretty conservative. So-
Okay. Thank you.
I have a question. So,
Yes, sir.
how many other franchisees are there roughly of Houndstown?
Right now, I think there's approximately 50, and there's 55 in development. So they have grown this brand very slowly and methodically. So they have tested, and make sure that each one of the franchisees has the support needed. So they grew teams to support each of the franchises as time went on also.
So presumably there's a franchisee agreement that you
Yes,
have?
an FDD.
Can you give us a feel for what some of the conditions are in the franchisee agreement?
For,
Compliance with the franchise, there's an agreement, right? Like what's in there?
so pretty much everything you can think of. The thing's probably 100 pages long. So it's everything. It's how your ethical portion of it, the pro forma, what your costs are going to be, the operation side of it, from all of the, the different kinds of tools that they use, the types of businesses you have to work through, that they have control over everything pretty much. So they're going to direct me at every level on what I can and can't do. They provide a tiny bit of flexibility, but as you know, franchises are very strict about people going outside of their lane. So I've got rule after rule after rule to follow. So that's part of why I want to do franchising rather than go out on my own. So I had some guidance along the way. It helps a lot.
Are you aware of any conflicts that the other 55 operational franchisees have had within their communities?
Meaning like with,
Sound,
Oh.
traffic, care of animals?
there's like after operation, no. But in the development phase, there's been questions or people who don't quite like the idea coming next to their business. And then that's addressed prior to development. That's never after the fact.
So with the other, you're telling me with the other 55 franchisees that are already operational, once they're in business, you're not aware of any community conflicts that have evolved with those 55 franchisees?
No, because I know the franchise. The franchise is a very, very good franchise. It's not owned by private equity, and I need to state that because that was super important to me coming into this, because I don't want an umbrella franchise that's not just going to set me off on my own and let me do my own thing and fail if need be. But this franchise cares about each one of their individual franchises. And so if there is conflict or any kind of issue, I'm not aware of it because I know it's been resolved.
That's helpful. It might have been helpful to incorporate by reference the franchise agreement in the application.
Well, part of the reason for excluding that is because there are lots of parts of the franchise agreement that don't really have to do with land use, have to do with, capital requirements and things like that are sort of protected business concepts. We thought it would be best just to address operational issues as they came up.
I apologize, I'm gonna have to go back, I'm gonna ask you to go back and tell me how you came up with the 37 again. I didn't catch square footage divided by 45, 40, go back and explain that again.
Typically what they like to do is the usable square footage. So the actual space is 4,053, and you subtract the lobby, the spa, all the unusable areas, and what you come up with, you divide that by 45, which is the number of square feet they like to have per dog. 45 square feet per dog.
And that's how you came up with the 37 kennels?
No, that's based on size. That's a conceptual drawing by an architect.
Well, that's just number of dogs is what that
Yes,
came
that's
up
the
with.
capacity.
So how did you come up with the 37?
That is just the magic from the architect. So I don't know how they fit what they do in these places, but that's his magic, so.
Well, you want to have a certain amount of square footage
Oh, yeah, there's, each one of the smaller rooms is like a 4x4, and that's a standard. And so each element of it is a standard by the franchise. But as far as how many of the actual boarding rooms there are, they like to have a smallest facility is 4,000 square feet to be a good, successful franchise, and between 4,000 and 7,000. 7,000, anything above that becomes.
Well, I think what you just said, each element is a standard
Yes.
set by the franchisee. So the
Yes.
runs, the individual runs are the standards set by the franchisee, the double runs are standard. It's,
As far as that's not size-wise, but that is definitely like all of the materials and everything you see in there. Definitely the boarding rooms, those are standard sizes. The playrooms are based on how much room you have left. They want a minimum of 5 play areas. If you can fit more, then they would like you to do that as well. And I think 350 square feet is the smallest, but I can't remember exactly the smallest play area that you can have. But there's little tiny dogs that don't need as big a space. Yes, and also we do temperament evaluations. We don't breed discriminate, but we do a thorough temperament evaluation of every dog that comes through, and then we group them by size, temperament, and energy level. So if you got an old timer who's doesn't have the same activity as the young 6-month-old pup that's kind of big, then you don't group those together and let them play all day.
How frequently are the dogs
and cats bathed or cared for, and is there a vet on staff, or you have?
We are developing the relationship. I have spoken with the veterinary clinic in that area. He also expressed the need for boarding in that area, which was one of my comfort levels because they stopped boarding, but they get calls every single day for boarding. He said, and they said that they were excited about us coming. I don't want to put the cart before the horse because I'm also finalizing the lease agreement. So I am going to be contacting the veterinary and then setting up that relationship, which I've already started doing. I've also contacted the groomers in the area because Crestwood recently has 3 groomers that have settled in that area. And so I've contacted each one of them, and there's obviously a need for dog services in that area with that many coming in with no kennels or boarding or anything to support it too.
Okay, so I'm trying to get this straight in my head here. So you're gonna have 37 dogs,
37 boarding dogs.
37 boarding
Yes.
dogs, but there will be times when you will be having more.
Yes. So
And do you have any idea of what basically that number what would be the total number of animals you would have be boarding at any one time?
approximately 70. That's rounding up from 68. So my thing is with the boarding also, I think it's important for you to know that the boarding includes the daycare. So we don't upcharge or anything for extra fees. So if you board your dog there, that's considered one of our daycare dogs at the same time. So we would only have, the additional number of dogs in there besides the boarders if we were maxed out to capacity.
So you're gonna deal with 37, but there might be a time when you might be up to 70.
Yes.
Okay.
And then we staff accordingly. The first year, the franchise requires that you have 1 employee per 12 dogs. And then every year, if you're successful and you're doing well, then every year after that, it's 1 employee per 15. So, and then it's kind of up to me how much I want to spend on wages and things, if I want to staff more or less, or.
Is that also a standard set by the franchisee?
Yes.
Or the franchise? Okay, any other questions? Okay.
Just one thing, and I don't know if the staff would like to come up, but I just asked Jim about the presence or absence of regulations regarding waste, and there are no regulations regarding dog waste.
You say there are no regulations regarding dog waste?
No. So that's another thing where well, okay.
Thanks for speaking for me, but I did call Charlie Ward. They're in a director's meeting, so I texted him and asked him the question, are there any regs? And his answer was nope. So they don't regulate indoor dog waste.
Okay, thank you.
So I think with that, obviously there are lots of different ways to incentivize good behavior. Here, Ms. Beggs is going to be making a significant investment. The franchise is making an investment in her and her ability to operate the property well and care for dogs well in the community. And we think that those incentives line up well in terms of keeping the property clean, keeping it in a condition that people want to bring their animals back, want to board them on a repetitive basis. So we're happy to take any additional questions. Otherwise, I think that the evidence that's been presented to you today demonstrates that we comply with the zoning ordinance, we comply with the animal control ordinance, and I think that the testimony you have heard also demonstrates that this use is essential and will be beneficial to the community, and we would ask that you approve the conditional use permit.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions? Okay, thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Is there anybody here wishing to speak in favor of the application? Opposed to is there anybody wishing to speak in opposition to the application? Board members, questions for anybody? Okay, I'm going to close the floor, open it up for general discussion.
I think the fact that there is no opposition from the surrounding buildings is significant. And per the testimony, Ms. Beggs that there's no known issues after operation has begun with any of the other franchisees. Also needs to be taken into account. And the fact that, as I brought up before, that there's a franchise in place that deals with the items that we were most concerned about: noise, odor, and things like that. This isn't something, it's not their first rodeo, so to speak. They do have some background in this type of business. So I would be in favor.
So as a owner of multiple dogs and horses, I understand the need in the community for boarding animals. The franchise model, I think, is helpful. That the fact that there's already 55 franchisees operational, presumably, if there's these type of operations in Midtown Manhattan, they've got a model that deals with noise and waste and things like that that we might be concerned with in a suburban strip mall area. So, I can see the need. I also am aware that the Crestwood Animal Clinic, which we go to all too often, is nearby, and there's a need there to support them as well. So I would be in favor of the application.
Okay, any other discussion? Hearing none, I'm ready for a motion.
Motion to approve OC 24-001 for a conditional use permit for a kennel including pet daycare and grooming services on the property located at 5998 Pleasant Colony Court, Suite 17 in Crestwood, zoned C3 General Business District. The character and objective of the proposed use and the potential impact on the community and its surroundings are appropriate. The community or neighborhood is in need for the proposed use, and there are potential benefits to the community and or neighborhood. The proposed use is compatible with the surrounding land uses and general character of the area, including such factors as height, bulk, scale, intensity, traffic, noise, odor, drainage, dust, lighting, and appearance. Conditions of approval. The conditional use shall only apply to the application considered at the January 18th, 2024 Oldham County Board of Adjustments public hearing. The applicant shall provide details of the sound mitigation efforts undertaken for the common walls with adjacent common tenants, adjacent commercial tenants. The application shall provide details of the odor mitigation efforts undertaken for the kennel business. The kennel business shall be restricted to an indoor operation and shall not have outdoor runs and/or play areas. The kennel business shall comply with all established federal, state, and county ordinances and requirements. And that is my motion.
Thank you, Gretchen. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Charles. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? It's been approved. Okay, Gretchen, if you'd like to read the next one, please.
OC 24-002, an application has been filed requesting a variance in road frontage for a property located at 3411 West Highway 524 in Westport.
All right, good morning. Brian Fogel, Assistant Director, Oldham County Planning Development Services. The request before you all right now is a variance in a road frontage requirement to create an approximate 11-acre parcel at 3411 West Highway 524. Notification for today's hearing was provided on our website. Adjoining property owners were mailed notices, and then a legal advertisement appeared in the Oldham Mirror newspaper. So right now, what I'm going to call the parent parcel is approximately 217 acres in size. And what the applicant is proposing to do is to create an 11-acre parcel that would have 0 feet of road frontage, resulting in a residual tract of approximately 206 acres. In terms of the area, it's located up in the northeastern part of the county. The reason our GIS aerial photography ends right here is that it's real close to Trimble County. So our photography basically kind of ends here at Patton Creek and the county line. The particular property is notable on the aerial because it's basically this plateau area right here, and you can see this clear area, which is where they're proposing to create the 11-acre parcel off of the 200-something acre property, that the rest of it is heavily wooded. So just in terms of general orientation, Highway 42 is here, 524 comes up, loops around, comes back down into Westport, and Westport is located right there. Just more of a close-up, again, on the top of the ridge of the plateau area. You can see where it's cleared out and that the rest of the property is heavily wooded. The driveway access to the property is right here through this wooded area to its intersection with Highway 524. So the house, the property, the driveway is all existing right now as part of the 217-acre parcel. And what they're proposing is to create an 11-acre parcel that would basically be focused on the existing residence that's right here. And then there's a pole, a barn, or a metal building that's located right there. The overall property on this photo is highlighted in red. And then the zoning in the area is either agricultural or conservation, basically in that whole quadrant of the county. And the conservation zoning district has a requirement for road frontage, which is why they're making the variance request to you all to create the 11-acre parcel. A little bit of site history with this particular property, but it all has to do with basically the creation of the 217-acre parcel where either properties have been added to it through a minor plat, not requiring any type of approval from the board, or building permits that have been issued for the barn or the house. So specifically, the zoning ordinance in the Conservation Zoning District requires that any new parcel have 300 feet of road frontage. And what they're proposing is to create the 11-acre parcel with 0 feet of road frontage, requiring a variance of 300 feet. So in terms of access to the 11-acre parcel, it would continue to have access off of a 20-foot wide access easement that originates on Highway 524. So they're not proposing any type of change to the driveway access to the property. And then the residual 206-acre parcel that'll be left over does have approximately 185 feet of road frontage on Hidden Valley Road, where you go back to Hidden Valley Campground. It's a copy of the zoning ordinance with the standard listed that whenever you're creating a parcel that's over 2.5 acres in size, that it has 300 feet of road frontage. And in their justification statement, the applicants have expressed that they're applying for the variance from you all for estate planning reasons, that they don't intend to use the property any differently than it's been used in the past, that they want to create the 11-acre parcel for estate planning reasons and then still maintain ownership of the residual 206-acre parcel. The survey plat showing what they're proposing to do. So basically what you see highlighted here in yellow corresponds roughly with that aerial photograph where you saw the clearing on top of the ridge or the plateau area, and then the heavily wooded areas are all around this on this side. So the intersection with 524 has an existing driveway and a 20-foot wide access easement that would not change. It would go here, come up to the first part of the 11-acre parcel where there's a barn and a metal building, and then continue up to the home that's located back here. And then just highlighted here in yellow is the 20-foot wide access easement where the existing driveway is at with its intersection with 524. And then down here, the 185 feet of road frontage that would remain with the 206-acre residual parcel along Hidden Valley Camp Road. So that basically is the request to create the 11-acre parcel with 0 feet of road frontage, which is why they're having to ask for a variance from the Board of Adjustments. We did receive one phone call from an adjoining property owner when we mailed the notices out, basically just asking, well, what are they asking for? We explained to them what they were asking for, and they didn't have any concerns once they understood what the actual application was. We've not received any walk-in traffic or emails or letters and expressing an opinion about the request either. And that concludes the staff report.
Brian, can you go back to the map, the aerial map? There. Up in the upper left-hand corner where all the yellow is and all the...
Right.
Is that Westport? I'm trying to figure out.
No.
What is that?
It's I call it campground, but it's called, there's more than camps back there. There's homes. It's Hidden Valley. Westport, and I'm going to go back to the other aerial, is a little bit further away. So Westport is located right there.
Okay.
All right. What you had me pull up the first time is located along the river right here, Hidden Valley, which is accessed off Hidden Valley Road, which basically runs down along Bell's Branch there. And then the particular property that you're all considering is here.
Got it. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I'm a little confused. Show me the access easement, the 20-foot access easement to 524. That currently is there. I understand the subject 11 acres is looking for 0 foot to any. The residual lot is my question. Are we landlocking the residual lot? Where is that road frontage?
The road frontage is here
Okay, on Hidden Valley.
on Hidden Valley Road.
And that satisfies CO1?
Well, in starting to look at this application, I had that question myself. How did we end up with a 217-acre parcel that doesn't have 300 feet of road frontage? And the answer is it's pre-existing.
Yeah, okay.
It existed prior to the time that we had that particular standard.
But the fact that we are here today regarding the 11 acres, creating the 206 residual, don't we also need the variance on the 206?
I mean, no, because you're taking right.
It's just the residual.
Pre-existing lot, this road frontage is not changing.
Yeah, the subject matter is the 11-acre tract. Again, it doesn't comply, it's pre-existing on the
Okay,
residual
all right.
property. And again, it is for estate planning purposes only, so, it doesn't change any land uses.
Okay, all right. All right, any other questions? Okay, thank you. And if we can have the applicant come forward? Good morning.
It was Travis Wilson with Denton's Bingham Greenbaum. We represent Ryan Seal and Robert Seal.
All right,
101 South Fifth Street, Louisville, Kentucky, 40202.
okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman of the board, this is relatively straightforward, so I'll keep it brief. We represent Robert Seal and Ryan Seal, who are with me here today. With respect to their estate planning, Robert Seal owns the larger property there. The goal here is to carve out the portion of the land that is actively used by Robert, and then to gift the remaining property, the larger parent property here, into a gift trust that will be controlled by Ryan Seal, his grandson, who is the trustee of that trust and the primary beneficiary of that trust. Again, it's purely for estate planning purposes. Basically, we want to move that value out of Robert Seal's taxable estate. And then ultimately, the goal is for this entire property to end up in that gift trust so it can stay in the family unaffected by federal estate taxes. As mentioned earlier, there's no changes planned with respect to the use. There's no development plan, no plans now or in the long term really to subdivide or anything like that. Essentially, it really is purely for estate planning purposes. And with respect to that easement, we'll be entering into a shared maintenance agreement between the trust and Robert on the remaining parcel there. I have Robert and Ryan here with me today if you'd like them to comment, but glad to answer any questions y'all may have.
Okay, thank you. Any questions?
I have a question. So that the variance is being granted to the applicant, Ryan Steele, correct?
My understanding that Ryan did submit the application
Okay.
with the consent of Robert. Ryan, as a trustee, will, once this is approved, will have control of this parcel.
So the variance is not being granted to the trust?
No, sir. So it is granted, is being granted to the current owner, Robert, to parcel off this particular 11-acre tract.
Do we need to make it necessarily assignable to Ryan or the trust? I don't quite understand what the
So, it's a great question on a technicality. Basically, when you're all looking at this, you're granting the variance to the land regardless of who the ownership is with.
Okay, thank you.
All right,
Did you mention that there is a maintenance agreement already in place or that it will be put in place?
It will be put in place if this is approved.
All right. Thank you.
any other questions? Okay, thank you. Is there anybody here wishing to speak in favor of the application? Anybody wishing to speak in opposition of the application? Board members, questions for anybody? Okay, I'll close the floor. You'll need to come forward. Ma'am, let me get your name and address and get you sworn in.
Okay, it's Joanne Fowler.
Move down a little bit. There we go.
Joanne Fowler, and at 2802 Arden Road, Louisville, Kentucky, 40220. I have a question. I have the last lot on the Hidden Valley Road, one of the camps. I have the last one. Is any going to be done to that property that's down? Because Robert Steele owns the next lot. So I was wondering if there's anything going to be done at the end of Hidden Valley Road.
Okay, what's being brought before us on this board today is just that 11 acres that's being sectioned off, and they're asking for reprieve on the road frontage. So
Okay.
regarding anything else that's going on down at the end of the property, none of that is being brought before us today.
Oh, okay.
Now, you may, Jim, do you have any?
Well, you're asking about access, and
Yes.
that's not subject to the question this morning they don't proposing, but after this hearing, you can ask them if they intend to have access off of that road.
Because I didn't know where the 11 acres was at, that they're going to.
It's on the front.
If you look, yeah, if you look here, it's that piece right in the middle, and it comes off of the existing driveway up 524, so you're down here.
I'm the last one.
Right, yeah, so.
It's going to be in there.
That's correct.
Oh, okay. Okay, thanks a lot.
Okay, all right. All right, now, board members, questions for anybody else? All right, I'm going to close the floor for public hearing, open it up for general discussion. Seems to be pretty cut and dry.
Yeah.
No discussion? I guess the only thing I have is we may want to put the perpetual access easement agreement and the condition of, you
I
got
put
it?
it in, yeah.
Any other discussion? If not, I'm ready for a motion.
Okay. Motion to approve OC 24-002 for a variance in road frontage for a property located at 3411 West Highway 524 in Westport. This will not adversely affect the public health, safety, or welfare and will not alter the essential character of the general vicinity and will not cause a hazard or nuisance to the public. It will not allow an unreasonable circumvention of the requirements of the zoning regulations. As far as the conditions of approval, the variance shall only apply to the application considered at the January 18th, 2024 Oldham County Board of Adjustments public hearing. And I'm adding a second condition of approval that the maintenance agreement will be filed for the common drive.
Okay. All right, we've got a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Bill, any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? It's approved. Okay. And Gretchen, if you want to move on to the next one.
OC 24-003, an application has been filed requesting a conditional use permit for an owner-occupied short-term rental property located at 7801 Covington Ridge Cutoff in Westport.
Sorry, Ryan.
All right. Ryan Fisher, Oldham County Planning and Development Senior Planner. So as Ms. Chitwood stated, this is an owner-occupied short-term rental before you today, asking for a conditional use permit on that. It's 7801 Covington Ridge Cutoff in Westport. Showing the location of the property, sits on 1.65 acres. Zoning is both AG1 and CO1, although a good majority of the property and where the house is located at is all on the AG1, and you'll see that here in a second. There's just a small little portion in the rear that is conservation. No site history on the property as far as the case history goes. We did post that to the website at the end of December last year. Adjoining property owner notices were mailed out on the 3rd of January, and the public notice appeared in the Oldham Era on the 11th. Here is the property in question at 7801 Covington Ridge Cutoff. And here is the zoning. So as you can see, majority of that in the AG1, just that small little portion in the rear of the CO1 zoning area. So the applicant's requesting a conditional use permit for an owner-occupied short-term rental property. Thinking about the new ordinance that just went into effect, in item A definition states that the owner-occupied short-term rental is the owner of record whose primary residence is located on the same lot, or in this case, an immediately adjacent lot of the short-term rental property. So you'll see that in a second, that this owner does live in the immediately adjacent lot of the short-term rental. So the owner actually resides here at 7821 Covington Ridge, and they own all of this property as well. The 7801 is here. So they do own all of that property that's immediately adjacent to the short-term rental. Item B1 in the short-term rental property, permitted use and conditional use standards do show that in the AG1 zoning district, the owner-occupied short-term rental does have to go before you all to ask for that conditional use permit. All this was included in your staff packet as well to make note of. So the applicants have refurbished a two-story, about 1.5-story, 3-bedroom, 2-bath cabin that they intend to utilize as a guest cabin for not only their family and friends, but also lodging for individuals that participate in the applicant's blacksmith classes on the adjacent farm and for guest rental through short-term rental platforms such as Airbnb and VRBO. And there is a picture of the cabin. If granted that conditional use permit, the owner must comply with all the operating requirements and standards as outlined in those short-term rental regulations, item C, which once again were included in your staff packet. A couple that we will look at, as we've done with all the other owner-occupied short-term rentals, are the maximum occupancy, which is twice the number of bedrooms, or as I like to say, 2 people per bedroom, plus an additional 4, and so they have 3 bedrooms in that residence, and so they would have a maximum occupancy of 10 individuals based on that definition. A couple floor plans here showing those bedrooms. On the first floor, they have 1 bedroom right here, and then 2 bedrooms upstairs. So once again, that maximum occupancy would be 10 individuals. Same way with parking, those regulations do require that parking does occur on the property and have sufficient parking. So when you take that maximum occupancy divided by 2.5, which is the formula used there in our regulations, they have to have 4 parking spots. There is plenty of parking available on this property. You'll see in some pictures here on the next slide, that there is plenty of areas for individuals to park on the property. So here's a view looking into the property, a little bit closer of view, and then there'll be one that's provided here looking at the neighbor at 7777 Covington Ridge Cutoff. So in summary, the applicant's requesting a conditional use permit for that owner-occupied short-term rental on their property located at 7801 Covington Ridge Cutoff. Potential conditions of approval for you to consider. It shall only apply to the application considered here today at this January 18th, 2024 Oldham County Board of Adjustments public hearing. The applicant shall comply with all regulations concerning short-term rental properties outlined in those zoning regulations, section 250-050. The conditional use permit shall be automatically revoked upon transfer or sale of the property, and the applicant shall apply for and be issued the actual short-term rental property permit or license before renting the property. And with that, as far as any note or anything, nobody received no calls, no emails on anything regarding this. So that I'll entertain any questions.
I have a question, Ryan. And the definition of owner-occupied, so as I understand the application here, the owners are going to live in one building, but this adjacent building, they don't live in, okay?
Correct.
So with respect to the new regulations that we have they have to be owner-occupied, but the owners aren't really going to occupy this building. So, I mean, I'm not quite sure where the regulations draw the line there.
So when the regulations were written, what they determined was people that are immediately adjacent to the property or on the property are mostly affected by anything that happens on a short-term rental property. So any owner that would either be on the direct property or immediately adjacent still has access to be able to access house, rather than somebody that we found that is in another state. So when the regulations were written, and if anybody wants to come up and help me, they're more than welcome to. But we determined that they either had to reside on the property or an immediately adjacent lot.
Which they don't in this case.
Well, they do because they own all of that
They own
land.
it, but the primary residence is not adjacent to the subject property.
Technically correct.
Okay?
Although it's separated only by an invisible property line on the ground. I mean, they are nearby. Now, it is within your authority to determine whether or not this is an appropriate interpretation of the regulations.
So this
We-
could be
staff-
precedent setting. If we make a decision here, it could basically set precedent for future decisions.
I don't know if it's precedent or reference, and I think there's a very very clear distinction between the two. Each case has to be considered on its own merits. And certainly, because you have a collective memory of previous cases, you would think, well, gee, did we do this or not? You can't base your decision on whether we've done it before or not. You base it on the merits of the case in front of you. So is it precedent setting? Not really. I'm splitting hairs. But again, it's going to be in your memory. Now, as your staff, we felt that this was a comfortable application to bring forward. You don't have to agree with us. It's up to you to determine whether or not we made the right choice. But since it's right in the same vicinity and really only separated by vacant land and a property line that's not visible on the ground, they are right nearby.
So I also have a question. So the name of the applicant is Barter Property Management LLC, right? And the people that own the property are Rick and Stephanie Barter, okay? If we were to approve this, are we granting it to the applicant or to the owners of the property? And what happens if the LLC gets transferred or sold to some other person?
Well, there's a binding element that says it can't be transferred. We've started doing
No,
that.
not, I mean, the
So
LLC would not be, so I'm saying if the LLC gets sold to somebody else.
Then.
The LLC would still own the property.
Well, then I believe the conditional use goes away. With that binding element,
You just come back on it.
they would have to come back, right?
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, even just transfer of ownership of that LLC, they would have to come back, according to what we put as a binding element and in our regulations.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's all my questions.
And you can ask the applicant the relationship between Barter LLC and, of course, their last name is Barter.
Right.
To be clear.
Right, I understand.
All right, any other questions for Ryan? Okay, thank you.
Can I get out of your presentation? Okay. Morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Mr. Combs, Ms. Edgar. Mike Swansburg with Swansburg and Smith, located 117 West Main Street here in LaGrange, 40031. I also have with me Rick Barter this morning, who is one of the two members of Barter Property Management LLC, which is the technical owners of that, and I can talk about that as well in terms of them being the sole members of the LLC as well. But he is also here this morning to talk and answer any particular questions you all might have about their intended uses, the idea behind that, their ownership, anything along those lines that you all may want to know about. They would be more than happy to talk about that through Mr. Barter here this morning. Mr. Fisher did an excellent job, as he always does, of going through initially kind of the application and the proposal, and a question that came up that we actually kind of anticipated was going to come up, and we want to talk about that. We have nothing to hide on this front, understanding that the regulations have been changed by Oldham County very recently. In fact, on October 3rd, as everyone is aware, at this point, the fiscal court amended the comprehensive zoning ordinance regarding short-term rental properties. Under the current structure, properties zoned as AG1 and CO1, which you've already seen on the map, are the two zoning designations for the lot that we are talking about, may be approved to be conditionally used as owner-occupied host short-term rental properties. I want to get to that owner-occupied host question here in a second, but I do want to address that. You've already seen this, but again, just as a reminder, the proposed property is located in that blue line there at 7801 Covington Ridge Cutoff. And as you already indicated through Mr. Fisher's presentation, the majority of it is AG1. There are some portions of it that are in fact CO1 as well down here at the bottom. I don't actually have the zoning map embedded into this particular picture. I apologize for that, but that was in the presentation that Mr. Fisher gave earlier. Be happy to ask for his assistance to bring that up if that is another question for you all. So we discussed a second ago when Mr. Fisher was doing his presentation about the ownership of the property. Again, the blue part that is seen on your screen here is the subject, or the lot that we are talking about is the subject of the application. Rick and Stephanie Barter, Mr. Barter is here, of course, are the sole members and managers of Barter Property Management LLC, which technically owns the property. And they personally own and reside within all of the land adjacent to 7801 Covington Ridge Cutoff, which is to the right of this red line. So all of this is actually one farm. And The subdivision of it, the yellow lines that you see here, were done for various reasons that comport with other regulations and pursuant to the comprehensive plan in terms of, for example, whether they can have additional homes or additional structures on the property, anything to that effect. That is why the property has been subdivided. But as a practical matter, the entirety of this is in fact one farm that is all owned by Rick and Stephanie Barter. And it is the property that we would submit is immediately adjacent to the property that is the subject of the application. The position that we would take in this, and immediately adjacent, I would submit, is not technically defined anywhere. But what we believe a reasonable interpretation of the immediately adjacent designation is to either be someone who lives on the property, as Member Furco suggested. You either live on the actual lot itself, or you live next to it. And the regulation itself says that obviously the residence on the primary residence is on the immediately adjacent lot. Again, our submission is that they live next door. They live on the farm that is in fact immediately adjacent to the property, even though, as has been indicated, there are technical subdivisions in this context. They live next door. And one of the things that we would actually propose as part of this is to have a binding element. We would submit that this is a proposal that we would make, is a binding element that if the Barters actually got sold off any of these parcels, even if they continued to own this part through the existing property management, that the approval that we're seeking today would cease to exist. That would continue to be, that would be a proposed binding element, is that, again, we submit that they own all the property and live on the property that is immediately adjacent to the proposed lot. But we would submit that if it is a position that would help everybody out in this context, we would absolutely agree to a binding element that if any one of, we're talking at this point, a difference of about 50 feet really is up here, is about the closest mark you're going to have between the two. If they sold off any of these properties, then the approval ceases to exist.
Can you point out for me the building that they live in on this map versus where they?
It's right here.
So they live right there.
They're right here, and the cabin is right here.
And the cabin is there. Okay.
And there's nothing in between them other than, again, they've got fence, they've got open field and some woods here, but they're literally next door. From our position, I understand that there could be another viewpoint on that, but our position is that they are in fact, their primary residence is in fact immediately adjacent to this, because it is all part and parcel of the single farm that is in fact immediately adjacent to it. But again, we would submit that if there is a question on that front, to the extent that it, again, the property up here is about 50 feet where they, difference between where they don't touch at this very northernmost corner here. But if there was any sale of this property, and we would also agree, obviously, a binding element would be that if, for example, Barter Property Management is bought out by somebody else, and obviously it also continues, or it ceases to exist on that front as well. We have no problem with that as well.
So do they own 7811 as well?
That is all, yes, sir. That's all part of the same farm.
Okay.
Sir, do you want to come on up and talk about it? But you got to be sworn in. You got to be sworn in first. So.
Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Name and address.
Rick Barter, 7821 Covington Ridge Cutoff, Westport, Kentucky, 40077. As Mike said, and I'm sorry to jump in, I just wanted to clarify, I don't know what that 50-foot mark is up there. We own all that whole farm, so everything from that red line to the right is all ours. The reason the house is on its own little subdivision there is because there's another house on the farm property. I couldn't build another house on the farm in the same zoning, in the same property, so I had to subdivide that 11 acres out to put my primary residence there. I just want to clarify.
And when I talk about the 50 feet, what I'm indicating here is the 50-foot difference between the absolute corner of the lot on which the primary residence arguably sits and the closest point to the lot that we are talking about applying. This difference here is about 50 feet. But again, we would submit that as a practical matter and consistent with what we believe to be the intent of the zoning change, which was, from our perspective, to avoid having individuals coming from out of the state or out of the area purchasing land here in Oldham County, turning it into short-term rentals, and then never being here. That's not the case here. This is very much a group of individual, or a husband and wife who owns all the property here, and in fact live next door, and in fact will be present during the entirety of this process. I do want to continue on. Mr. Fisher brought in some photos. I do just want to reiterate, just to show you all what we're talking about. Again, this is the entranceway that you see. It's from this perspective right here, coming down this way on the property. The farm that we are talking about, in which they reside, is on the other side of these trees. And again, this is the structure itself that we are talking about. And Mr. Fisher's already shown you a picture of this, but I just wanted to reiterate to you what it is that we're talking about at the end of the day. He's also indicated, but I just want to again re-show you what the inside of it looks like. There were 3 bedrooms. The maximum amount of this is 10. I would, Mr. Barter and I just talked about this. There will, I think from his perspective, he doesn't anticipate there ever being a situation where there will be up to 10 people there. But there are 3 bedrooms there. We talk about what, and Mr. Barter can talk more in depth about this, but there really were 3 purposes behind this request. First was a guest cabin for family and friends who are visiting them while they're here. They wanted to have the flexibility of, if they have folks come into town, they have the ability to let them stay at this cabin just off their property while they're here in town. The second one, of course, and I'll let Mr. Barter talk more about this, is that he teaches blacksmithing classes on the farm. And he's had a number of requests for individuals who are coming into town as part of that class who are looking for a place to stay, and they wanted to have the flexibility to make that an opportunity for somebody who might be participating in those classes to be able to stay there on a very temporary basis as part of that class. Rick, how often are those classes, and how long are they usually?
It's sporadic. It's sporadic. I've done.
Come on, you got to talk.
Sorry, I'm sorry. They're sporadic. I haven't done many. I've been teaching at a place in Pennsylvania, and I've started offering classes on my farm. And I hope to bring in guest instructors as well from around the country to have a workshop. It can range from a one-day class to a weekend class. I don't have any plans to do anything larger than that. The max I could ever conceive of would be a 1-week class. And as Mike said, the goal for us for this was flexibility. It gives us a bunch of options as opposed to other rental properties we have in LaGrange that are long-term rentals. This seemed to make sense given that there's also some, we have neighbors that have some Airbnbs, Keith Cummings, and I can't remember their name, somebody over on Bohannon. And we were talking to them over the years, and they were just so happy with their experience with it that when this cabin came available and it needed a lot of work, we thought, wow, this could be great for us. It'd be the most flexible option would be family blacksmith classes and some short-term rental to help pay the bills. And I can talk at length. I'm sorry to cut you off, Mike. I can talk as much as you can stand, probably. But we have no plans to have. I could never see 10 people in that house. We have no plans to do that. We're rural people. We love being out there in Westport where it's rural. We have a farm. We're right next door. We don't want the noise and the drama associated with stuff. We wouldn't rent to anybody younger than 25. We are always there. You can see the cabin from my house. I farm it. I have beef cattle. I have chickens. We're always in that area. So it's not like we're going to be an absentee owner. We're there. We live there every day. We're very concerned about quiet and our neighbors. And we're taking steps to make sure that if we are approved, we're putting some noise sensors in, some smoke sensors. We have no outside amenities, if you will, to generate noise. it's primarily just a place for people to stay. And
So are you a blacksmith?
Yes.
Okay, and
Yes, sir.
roughly how many classes per year would you say?
I'm
you do?
sorry?
How many classes in a year would you say that you do?
I've done 2 on a regular schedule, 2 a year, usually in the spring. Sorry, Mike.
And along those lines too, we talk about flexibility and also interacting with the neighbors. The Barters have actually proactively gone out and talked to all of their neighbors or reached out to them in some context. A few of them they've in fact talked to personally. Some of them who they did not get in touch with personally, they actually reached out to by letter, informing them of what was going on, and then inviting them to reach out and ask any questions or have any conversation about that as well. As of this point, the individuals that they have spoken with have expressed no opposition. In fact, these were the individuals who are immediately next door and immediately across the street. Is that correct? Or behind?
Behind. The neighbor, the neighbor immediately next door, Tim, he had no problem with it from the beginning when we said we were going to do this, before we realized that is it a statute? Before it changed. And then we had to apply. When I went over to talk to him, I said, hey, by the way, you're going to get a letter. We're applying for this. This is what it's for. He had no problems. And then Tim Baker, who lives right behind the property, his property comes behind the cabin. He had no problems at all either. We talked to him in person. The other 2 folks, the Paynes and the Creels, we couldn't get them. It was around Christmas time, and we knocked on their door, but we left all our contact information, a page of kind of exactly what we were submitting here, what we were doing, and our email address and our phone number. And like I said, we know all the neighbors pretty well, and I don't think they'd hesitate to reach out.
In addition to the uses we talked about, just for the benefit of the board, we have discussed, and this was part of our application, how it also runs consistent with the Oldham County Comprehensive Plan. We would submit to this body that the application and the proposed uses would comport with land use objective LU14, which encourages the preservation of Oldham County's rural character, particularly through the cabin design and layout. They're very much, if you could see on the pictures, it's very much a pioneer look. And that's they want to maintain that environment that is already there with the trees and mixed use. When I say mixed use, I mean in the context of the trees plus the existing fields, not to do anything else with it other than to maintain that existing feel of being in a cabin out in the country, which is where it is currently. Second one is Community Services and Facilities Objective CF4, which relates to educational enrichment opportunities. We've already talked about the blacksmithing classes that Mr. Barter puts on and opportunities that may present itself to have individuals coming from around the country, if not around the world, to participate in those types of things here in Oldham County. And then third, again, business industry goal B13, which encourages options that preserve farm, forest, and open space. That's what we're talking about here, is maintaining, not developing something into a new concept, overdeveloping a piece of land, but maintaining that rural character that Mr. Barter talked about that's consistent with his neighbors and the farm that they own, which is, again, next door to that. So the summary for us, the ask, if you will, is we believe, again, consistent with the comprehensive zoning ordinance. We respectfully ask this board to grant Barter Property Management conditional use short-term rental property permit for the property located at 7801 Covington Ridge Cutoff, just outside Westport, Kentucky. And with that, that's all we have presentation-wise. We certainly answer any other question that you all might have.
Thank you. Questions?
Nope.
I have one.
Go ahead.
You did say this is all one form.
The farm?
The form, this is one form.
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you.
Yes, sir. So just again, for your benefit, on the screen here, this is the property that's the source of the application. All of this next door to it is one farm.
Hey, Michael, they probably know, but I may have missed it. This Doris Schultz, tracks 1 and 2. That's an old survey. Did I assume he's acquired those tracks?
Is that 7811 and the other one, is it track 1 and 2 there? I'm not sure what,
I know the plat that you've got here, though, was done in 2001, I believe, and it shows that Doris Schultz owns it, but I don't know, it's kind of confusing a little bit.
oh, is that?
They probably know the answer, I didn't
Can we
hear
go
you.
back to that? Do we have that on the presentation?
Oh, okay.
Oh, yes, sir. This was the original survey that I found in the cabin when we started to redo it. That's what I included, and yes, we own that property.
And just
That is.
show it on the overhead. Identify which one
Oh.
is which, and it's kind of confusing if you look at that plat versus what you got in the overhead.
See if I got the email right.
Now I've lost my overhead.
Is this the spot you're talking about, Mr. Combs?
Hang on.
Is this the document?
Hang on, we don't have it on our screen yet. There we go.
Is it this one here?
It's also in your staff report.
Yeah.
Is that the one you're
Yeah,
talking about? Yes, we own that. That's the
I
cabin. Sorry, that's the cabin, yes.
I understand, but do you have anything to show that you acquired it?
I have the deed. I don't have it with me.
Okay, well, Michael, I don't mean to confuse everything on it, but I'm just trying to figure that out. And now get the overhead and show me what track one is on the overhead.
Okay, so consistent with this and where we are on the map here. Do you know where track one is?
Track one is here. Oh,
Christie, can you switch back to the,
So we'll do the comparison here.
yeah.
I could have done that. I didn't know if they did.
I'm not sure what technology is eluding me. Sorry.
Okay, so we got Covenant Ridge Cutoff.
So-
Here's where the sign.
All right, so, I'm sorry, my office is waving me down too. Okay, you all okay with that?
This
Kate,
Covenant
I'm
Ridge
not sure
Cutoff
what you're
right here.
asking there. 7801.
Look,
Right.
look
Oh, so
on
you
here,
don't
it
own
Yeah.
shows
track two, that's
track
the neighbors.
one,
No, that's the
track
neighbor.
two,
This is me.
and
Correct.
The owner of track
Correct.
one and track two. Now,
Right.
on the overhead, we got lines drawn, but I don't know where one and two is.
Here, put it back.
So we figured out where we are.
That's-
It took us a second here.
Back to document.
They may know, but I don't know. Which is not
Oh,
unusual.
wow. Here, I'm gonna flip it around, I think. Oh, that's, okay, I'm sorry. Apologize. So this right here is 7801. This is my farm here. This is the cabin, 7801. This is my farm here.
So
well.
they do not own track two because that's not part of the property.
So that's what's confusing, you see?
Right.
Oh, thank you.
You'll see the third paragraph down, being track one, 1.6467 acres or less, and shows there's the paragraph that would refer to track one.
Okay.
So yes, sir, we own it.
And you do not own what was showing as track two there?
No, that's correct. That's Tim, I forget his last name, I'm sorry.
You want to go back to PC?
Go back to PC, please. Thank you.
Track two is this right here, right? That's track two.
Correct.
At what point did you purchase 7801?
It was, I don't recall the date, but it was last year.
Last year?
Yeah, we've been renovating it for about 7-8 months. Yep, April of 2022.
Okay.
So over a year. That's how far behind we are.
All right. Any other questions? So you had mentioned that you've done certain things to the farm for this and that, and taxes, and so that you can build houses, et cetera. If the yellow line on the shot here with us today, if that was Z'd out, and you would be adjacent to the subject property, is there a problem with consolidating those two properties?
No, there's not a problem with consolidating it. We just didn't do it because we had consolidated the whole farm. We had bought those 2 tracts after the fact, and it didn't seem necessary at the time.
You bought which 2 tracts after the fact?
The
7801
Oh, thank you. Here.
and 7811, is that what you're talking
This,
about?
yep, 7811. No,
Right.
7811 and this. It's one 6-acre tract, but when you look at it, it's divided into 2.
Okay. All right, so you bought those 2.
Shortly after in 2013, shortly after we acquired the farm. And we had just done a huge consolidation deed of the farm, bought these 2 back.
Okay. All right. All right, any other questions? Where do you hold the blacksmithing classes?
Well, I can't really see it right here. Hold on. In this building right here.
All right, so let me ask a similar question. The subject property, 7801, you do not plan on holding any commercial activity out of that?
No, sir.
Okay. Do you do the subject property? It is strictly for STRP, residential use.
Yes, sir.
No commercial, no other classes, blacksmithing, or anything else?
Nope. No, sir.
Do you, you had mentioned somewhere, somebody did, VRBO and Airbnb. Is it the intent to rent out that subject property, 7801, on VRBO and Airbnb? So that it is a short-term rental to the best of your ability? Or is the intent friends and family, whenever they come to the farm, and whoever does the blacksmithing classes, it's a place for them to stay? Do you understand my question?
I'm not sure. Yes, all 3.
Okay.
I'm not trying to be a wise guy.
No, it's a valid answer. It's, yeah. Okay.
That was one of the reasons we thought about doing the short-term rental, was just the flexibility involved. We do have a big family. We have them stay a lot. The short-term rental is a popular thing in our neck of the woods, and I've had actually had people request places to stay, and I've given them the neighbors' houses nearby to stay, and people had told me, well, it'd be nice if we could stay at the farm or near the farm, and the demand kind of found us.
All right. I guess my next question might be for the board, might be Tate for you, or even staff, but you guys are kind of involved in it. I do not see this. The regulation is adjacent property. And in my mind, I'm not buying that this is an adjacent property. It's close, and yeah, it's all part of one farm, but it's not an adjacent. You have subdivided this farm and cut it up, 3 or 4 different ways, however many, I don't know, but it is not an adjacent property. Now, I love, you had just said, if you want to put a condition on there that if we do, build on this or whatever, this conditional use goes away. And I absolutely, if we're going to approve this, I would require something like that be put in. But in my mind, this is not an adjacent property. So I guess to Tate and staff, if we're not considering this as an adjacent property, and it does go against regulation, then is that a problem? We have the authority on this board to decide gray matters and to interpret regulations, et cetera. I'm not suggesting that it is an adjacent property. Is that a problem?
My problem with it was, that's why my question was, is it one farm?
Well, they said that
But-
they have no problem with consolidating
Well,
these two pieces. Now, that's an extra step and extra money and all that.
Yeah.
And I know it's not the intent, but that would satisfy, that would make it an adjacent property. It is adjacent.
Well, as short-term rental properties go, this is one of the better ones because we
Yeah.
don't have half the room here complaining and jumping up and down, doing flips on everything else. And the staff, I like following what the staff recommendations are because they work with this all the time and they have take a position. I don't like to override their position if we can support it. And he's indicated already that we have the option if we wish to do that.
Okay.
And I like your suggestion on conditions that.
Okay, so if you don't have a problem with, if we're not saying this is an adjacent property, and that is the regulation, but we do have the authority to decide this
Correct.
with considerations, then I'm perfectly acceptable with that.
And they seem to accept your recommendation on it.
All right. So this will be, so we can accept this with the stated regulations that they have added.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they have
Because
no
this is
problem
not
with
an
that.
adjacent property.
Right.
So that needs to be put into whatever it is we do then. All right.
Any other questions for the applicant? All right, guys, thank you. Is there anybody here wishing to speak in favor of the application? Wishing to speak in opposition to the application? Board members, questions for anybody else? All right, I'm going to close the floor for public hearing, open it up for general discussion.
I'm actually very torn with this because great pains went into writing the new ordinance that deals with the many, many issues that were brought up about the short-term rentals. And making the ordinance specify that the primary residence of the applicant is on an adjacent property to the proposed CUP, that this does not meet that standard, in my opinion. I'm also a little concerned. I love the idea of it. I mean, I'd love to support you, the idea that you have, what you're doing. I think that's great. I just find that this is the first time since that new ordinance has gone into effect that we have looked at this. We haven't even had any other actual adjacent properties to primary residences under this new ordinance. So the first one we get is not actually sharing a common boundary. That is a sticking point for me. If the elimination of that common boundary between 7801 and 7811 were not there, if that were one property, you would still have to come before the board for the determination. But it would be sharing a common boundary with the primary residence. I am concerned also about what Bill said about this setting a precedent. Even though we do look at everything, the way it comes to us case by case, saying that we're just going to, kind of overlook the way that the ordinance is written, I have a bit of an issue with that, and I think it would be if we're going to do something like put into the conditions of approval that if 7811 was ever sold, that this would negate this, the determination if it were approved. I think that is less desirable than eliminating the boundary between those two lots and making it an actual adjacent property. And that's just my opinion.
No? Okay, so my position, I mean, we've got our attorney's position on it, we've got our staff's position on it. Even though it is not adjacent, we're not considering this adjacent, which is the regulation. There is, no other houses on that. It is all farmland. It's owned by them. I'm comfortable knowing that we have staff and attorney, their recommendation. I'm comfortable with putting a condition of approval on here to say if anything happens, to the properties in between the subject property and the primary residence, if there's any building or any consolidations or sold, or, however we want to word it, I'm comfortable with approving this with that type of condition. It's our job, I said, to interpret. We've got regulations, county and ordinance that we look at and consider, and it is our job to interpret those. And a lot of times we don't get, it's not exactly spelled out in the regulations, so we have to make interpretations. And even though we interpret this not to be adjacent, we still we have the authority to make a determination on this. Even though it doesn't fall exactly within the regulation, we can still say yes with these conditions. And that's my position.
And I guess my concern is they just went through a major effort to change policies,
Yep.
to change the law. I'm just not comfortable with, even with the conditions to say that's okay because the law says adjacent. That's the new law. That's
we
the
can
new
interpret
policy.
that.
Okay, yeah, we can interpret it, but then again, I guess my concern is, will it be interpreted every time after this?
Well, every case stands on its own.
Yeah.
Jim, you want?
I understand your deliberation. I don't have a problem with it. It sounds to me as though the question is not whether the conditional use is appropriate. I haven't heard anybody saying this is a bad idea to grant conditional use for a short-term rental.
Yeah.
So then the question is contiguous. The thought that comes to my mind is, what would make it contiguous? Does it have to just have a 50-foot contiguous, or does it have to have the entire boundary? And there's no previous discussion precedent idea to consider. So we're going to start whittling it down to, okay, if they're supposed to consolidate so it is contiguous, how much of a line has to be consolidated? And here's the way I view it, just as your staff, and this is why this case is in front of you. Those lines are invisible on the ground, and the ownership is invisible on the ground. I mean, they own all the land. There's not a question about ownership. It's just simply about, on maps, you have a line that distinguishes the difference. And, again, as staff, when we talked about it, we thought that because it's all in the same ownership, those lines didn't matter. So, again, that's just what we were talking about. But I'm going to go back to something that was said. I think the fact that we now put in there that if the property is sold, and if you put on any of this property is sold, changing ownership, the conditional use goes away, is really the weight. That's really what will regulate this. Again, eliminating a line, in my mind, doesn't do that. Yeah. A line distinguishing that separation of what's on a map. So again, that's just our idea. I respect that you're grappling with this, and it's up to you to kind of figure out whether this is a issue. And again, especially testing for the first time whether or not this is contiguous or not. We talked about that.
Rather than, rather than.
Can you can you lean forward?
I'd go ahead and.
Lean forward. I can't hear you.
Well, like I was trying to give you hand signals a minute ago, I mean, I agree with you, but if necessary, rather than turn something like this down, because I think it's very favorable, is to consolidate, possibly change your line and just consolidate it and be done with it, or make it a condition that, that we have
So here, I think this.
Imaginary line.
Yeah, I understand. This chart, I think, is what everybody's grappling with. Hey, wait till it pops up. All right. Look at it says non-owner occupied short-term STRP. This is a CO1, I believe. X means down below it, not permitted. this is not an owner occupied. And then, so what's the definition of owner occupied? It's the it's the adjacent. We're saying that we're not buying that this is adjacent.
Yeah.
But somewhere in here, we say Jason's okay, right? Any regulation that says-
Somewhere we say adjacent's okay, we're saying this isn't adjacent.
Got it. Again, that's the whole point of your discussion. They do own all the land.
And that was my thing. It's for one owner. It's just some lines that seem to be the difference.
I'm not buying that it's adjacent. But I'm also okay by saying, well, it's not adjacent, but I'm okay with putting a condition in here. However, that chart just said it's got a, non-owner occupied X, not permitted.
But do we cover ourselves and I agree with you, do we cover ourselves with that other condition of approval? To say that if 7811 were ever to transfer ownership, that this CUP would be rendered void?
At that
Then I
point,
think that we're in agreement with that.
At that point, it would clearly not be contiguous. There's no doubt about that.
Okay. And that's just something to think about in the future. If this ever comes up again, we have to look back at what we're thinking today, that if there is a parcel of property that does not share a common border with the primary residence, and that is ever sold, transfers ownership in any way, shape, or form, then that deal is done.
Yeah, that's good direction for us in the future as well. And again, I think we've had one or two inquiries where they were like, well, we're down the street, and we said, well, it's not contiguous.
Right.
Clearly not
Right.
not the same ownership, again, just.
Yeah, so my entire thought, so this isn't well, what if they sell that, so if we put that condition in there, that covers us.
Right. It covers us.
So
It does.
but
Yeah.
I'm not buying that this is adjacent.
Right, got it. But remember, the way we check that is annually, there's a permit required for short-term rental. Not here in front of you all, but if the conditions change, if a different owner comes and says, oh, I'm gonna rent this out and it doesn't go with the land.
Right.
And so annually, we have an opportunity to make sure that the conditions set by this body are enforced. If
So,
that gives you a
so
comfort
given
level.
that, so we, there's a definite grayness here in terms of immediate adjacent lot, definition or intent of the law. But we do have your oversight of your department to make sure that that continues. Obviously, we can put a condition if we do grant this, that there is common ownership between all of the lots involved here. Personally, having a horse farm, I see the need for blacksmiths, so there's definitely a need in the community for expanded, number of blacksmiths in the community. So there's that need, clearly. And so this grayness, I understand our technical concern, but I think, given the discussion we've had, I can get comfortable with it being gray and yet, with conditions, comply with the law.
Agreed.
Any other discussion? Thanks, Joe.
Well, there's just one other thing, that's in the back of my mind that has probably nothing to do with your all's decision, but that 11 acres is probably farm exempt, and you have to have more than 10 acres to get that farm exemption. If we consolidated, they'd probably lose that farm exemption if we lessened it below, just to get it contiguous. So again, all of these things were discussed with the applicant, and we sat down in the office, and we talked about all this, and so I see the direction you're going, that you're slowly getting a comfort level that this, although you could interpret it very easily as not being contiguous, that there are these checks and balances that kind of keep us in place. We should put this down as training time, too.
We will. All right, any other discussion? All right, I'm ready for a motion. One point of discussion. He does talk about blacksmithing and all that. And I'm asked the questions about no commercial activity out of the subject property, which he was okay with, and he said he doesn't do it anyway, but I would like that in the motion, no commercial activity.
In the conditions of approval?
Right.
Okay. One moment.
And the only reason, well, that's fine.
I think it's good.
All right, and with that, I'm ready for a motion.
Okay. After that. Motion to approve OC 24-003 for a conditional use permit for an owner-occupied short-term rental property located at 7801 Covington Ridge Cutoff in Westport. The character and objective of the proposed use and the potential impacts on the community and surrounding areas are appropriate. The conditions of approval. The conditional use permit shall only apply to the application considered at the January 18th, 2024 Oldham County Board of Adjustments public hearing. The applicant shall comply with all regulations concerning short-term rental properties outlined in the Oldham County Zoning Regulations, Section 250-050. Conditional use permit shall be automatically revoked upon the transfer or sale of the property. The applicant shall apply for and be issued a short-term rental property permit license before renting the property. If parcel 7811 at any time transfers ownership, the conditional use permit shall be rendered void. No commercial activity shall be conducted out of the property in question requested for the conditional use permit. And that is my motion. Does that cover all your bases for everybody?
I have a question. Shouldn't we say that at this particular meeting that we gave this specific condition, state this specific condition while we granted this motion, such as, well, no, never mind. We'll just keep it just like
It's going on record, so.
Okay, all right, so
As it stands, is everybody comfortable with that?
okay, do I have a second?
I'll second.
Charles, thank you. Discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? It's been approved.
I want to excuse myself. I've got an emergency MIW waiting on me next door.
Go for it.
If you need me, I'll let this other one over.
Thank you, I appreciate it. Okay,
I gotta go.
thanks.
There's no other people here to do it but me,
Okay,
unfortunately.
all right.
You can get a palace chairman up. I don't like those rollers.
I know, they are.
Uh-huh. Gretchen, thank you for holding it. You're doing fine. All right, buddy.
Thank you very much.
You take care, man. Ryan, you want to read the next one? Or, I'm sorry, Gretchen reads it.
Okay. OC 24-004, an application has been filed requesting a location and maximum square footage variance for a detached accessory structure, carport, on a property located at 4201 South Highway 53 in Ballardsville.
All right, thank you. Once again, Ryan Fisher, Oldham County Planning and Development Senior Planner. So this is a variance before you for both the location of a carport as well as the maximum square footage of two accessory structures that will be on the property. So we are in an R2 zoning area. It sits on 0.855 acres, residential land use. No previous site history. Case history, it was posted to the website at the end of December. Adjoining property owner notices went out in early January, and the public notice appeared in the ERA on the 11th. Here is the parcel in question. It sits along South Highway 53, Grandell Drive, just to the rear of the property. And there is the zoning map showing it is in the R2 zoning area. So the applicant is requesting a variance for a 20 by 12, 240 square foot carport that was placed just in front of the structure, 12 feet in front of the primary structure. The proposed accessory structure does meet the standards of Section 250-030 in regards to accessory uses and structures, with the exception of 2 items, and those are the 2 that we'll be looking at today with the request for the variance. So the first one would be item B in there, and then this was included in your staff packet, but the number of allowed accessory structures over 120 square feet and a total maximum floor shall be as follows. So accessory structures on a parcel size of 20,001 square feet to 0.99 acres, which is where the subject's parcel size falls, shall have a total maximum floor area of 1,200 square feet. And there is the chart from the zoning regulation that is also included in your staff packet showing they can have 2 accessory structures allowed and a total of 1,200 square feet. So the proposed carport that's before you today is only 240 square feet. However, there's an existing detached garage in the rear of the property that is 1,260 square feet. 45 by 28 foot. Now, there was previously a building permit that was issued on that. My only knowledge would be that the zoning regulations that dealt with the size weren't in place at that time. So kind of with both of those combined now, we're over that the 1,200 square feet that's allowed. So with the approval of the carport, okay, today, all of those accessory structures would equal 1,500 square feet. So they would be asking for a 300 square foot maximum square footage variance with the addition of the carport. All right, and I'm sure I'll answer questions on it here in just a second. But and then item E, which is the other one, states that no accessory use or structure shall be located in between the principal building and the front property line. So what we do with that is whenever anybody comes in and wants to place an accessory structure, we usually take a front line along the front edge of the house and say if it's anywhere in front of that line, you'll have to ask for the variance. Now, this individual does have a deck on the front of their house, which you'll see in some pictures. So really the carport extends even less than that 12 feet in front of that deck, but we take the house, all right? And you'll see that here in the picture. So those are both of the items you're gonna be looking at in regards to the variance. Here is a picture of the existing residence, the plat. You do have this in your staff report. The yellow box right here shows where the carport has been placed and sits just 12 feet. I know that's hard to read, but right there is 12 feet in front of the existing residence. The existing garage in the rear is what we noted that would cause this to have to ask for a maximum square footage variance, and that sits in the rear of the property. So here is the 240 square foot carport noted in the yellow, and then the 1,260 square foot detached garage that is already there in the rear of the property. Just another view of the property showing that detached garage in the rear. And then a couple pictures, these were provided with by the applicant of the carport in front. And I will just give you a little bit of backstory on this, and I know the applicant will probably touch on this. He provided some documentation within his justification of the timetable, but the carport started he inquired about it, getting a building permit. They said it's going to be in front. There was some miscommunication on when he could start construction. The gentleman was going out of town for work. And so the carport is actually there. There's going to be a couple more pictures in a second that our code enforcement officer did take while it was going up. But I'm sure the applicant will talk about that as well. So these are a couple pictures here that the applicant did provide of the carport. And then a couple pictures that code enforcement took as it was being installed. And like I said, there's a deck on the front of that house, so really it doesn't extend too much farther past where the deck is, but where we look at it would be the front edge of this house. So this area right here would be the 12-foot essential location variance where that's being placed in front of the structure. Oh, I don't know why that's sideways, but you can turn your head and and see that a little bit different. I had this turned in the presentation yesterday, but same picture as the one before. So 2 different variances would be before you. The maximum square footage variance, which once again, because of that detached accessory structure, the garage in the back, as well as the addition of this proposed carport that we're asking for today, are asking for a 300 square foot requested variance on that maximum square footage for both of those accessory structures. And then the location variance requesting the variance of the 12 feet to have the detached accessory structure, the carport, in front of the primary. And on both of those variance requests, the conditions of approval, it shall only apply to the application considered here today at the January 18, 2024 Board of Adjustments public hearing. We received no correspondence from anybody on this as far as phone calls, emails, letters, any of the sort. So now I'll entertain any questions about the maximum square footage, if that's where your questions are headed.
Go to the sideways picture, please.
The sideways picture, okay.
And just hang on for a second there. Any questions for Ryan? All right, sideways picture. Is there any issue with side variance, side yard
No.
setback? No. Is that abutting or the neighbor's fence? Is that what I'm seeing there?
No. Let me show you. I mean, the carport is going to be right here. So that may be his.
Go back to the sideways thing. Maybe that's the decking on the house.
And there's
I can ask you.
and there's a distance on
Okay, all right.
10 feet, he says. You wanted the sideways photo, didn't you?
Yeah. Okay, I don't know. I'll ask the applicant. All right, any other questions for Ryan? Okay, thank you. Thank you. If we can have the applicant come forward.
Good morning, everyone. My name is George Mingus. I live at 4201 South Highway 53 here in LaGrange, or actually it's Crestwood 40014. And I'm here. Oh, I'm sorry.
Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
Okay. So the facts that Ryan presented are the facts of the carport. As he alluded to, there was some miscommunications at the time that this was being constructed. As the applicant and standing here before the board, at the time this was erected and constructed, I believed I had a permit. Working through that later with planning and zoning, that's why I'm here before you to file for the variance. So I apologize for the confusion. I didn't intend to put this up and violate any rules or regulations or statutes. I thought I was good to go when I put it up. As far as your question with the fence, that is my fence. The closest edge of that carport is 10 foot to the property line. And I brought with me today my adjacent homeowner there at 4203. He's the closest homeowner to be in support of the carport. So.
All right, any questions for George?
I just want to affirm something that he's correct. There was miscommunication, and had it been clearer for him, I don't think he would have proceeded the way, but I'm glad he's here today, so and I apologize for that.
All right. Questions for George? All right, thank you, George.
Thank you.
You're in support of the application. If you just want to come forward and raise your right hand, get sworn in, state your name and address.
Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
My name is Tim Buttram. I live at 4203 South Highway 53, Ballardsville, Kentucky, 40014. You can see the red brick house to the right and the red pickup truck. That's my property and my truck and so forth. And I actually helped George construct this as well. And he really did a great job because this thing actually has concrete footers. It's put in the ground well, and it's a, very nice constructed unit. And I fully support, what he did there, so.
Okay, all right, thank you, Tim. Questions for Tim? Okay, thanks, Tim. Appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
All right, seeing nobody else, there's no other support and opposition. Board members, questions for anybody? Okay, I'm going to close the floor for public hearing, open it up for discussion. Very cut and dry.
Yeah,
I-
it is. I just want to caution Tim. So I noted in the applicant's justification that Tim has expressed an interest in building a similar structure. So he'll have to,
If I do it myself, it won't be toward the front.
okay, good. All right. I just want to make sure we did like imply that there's a permission there. Okay. That's it. That's my only comment.
The fact that the carport is kind of tucked in there, you know, and it's and the offset part of the home kind of, it juts back a little bit, kind of, I don't know, it doesn't seem to be too much of an issue as far as being in the front. And if I'm not understanding this correctly, the 1,500 includes the barn that's in the back, and then this, so I'm assuming the barn was already there when you purchased the property. So to stay within that 300 feet, I mean, you would have to make a structure that was insufficient if to stay within there. So that's reasonable.
Okay, any other discussion? All right, if not, I'm ready for a motion.
Okay. Well, one moment, I'm sorry. Lost my notes. All right, motion to approve OC 24-004, requesting a location and maximum square footage variance for a detached accessory structure carport on the property located at 4201 South Highway 53. Motion to approve the variance because it will not adversely affect the public health, safety, or welfare and will not alter the essential character and the general vicinity and will not cause a hazard or nuisance to the public and will not allow an unreasonable circumvention of the requirements of the zoning regulations because the impact is minimal and the justification is reasonable. Conditions of approval, the variance shall only apply to the application considered at the January 18th, 2024 Oldham County Board of Adjustments public hearing.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mark. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? It's been approved. Okay, we've got minutes. Everybody have a chance to review those?
Motion to approve the minutes.
Thank you, Bill. Need a second.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Minutes approved. And I've got a note that Charles and myself, we need to be sworn in, so we need to do that. And then if there's any other business.
Motion to adjourn.
Well, we got to get sworn in first, I think.
Oh, okay.
Oh, we got to go. Oh, okay. All right, well, there you go.
Motion to adjourn.
I need a second.
Second.
Discussion. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, meeting adjourned.